Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Thank you for tuning in. This is Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, and today we're talking about a book that was written about goalie guys who didn't wear face masks. It's called Brave Face. It's by Rob Vanstone, who we've had earlier on this program. So, Brave Face, Rob Vanstone, thank you again for coming on with us. And what prompted you to write this book?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Dennis. It's great to chat again. It's hard to believe it's been about 4 years since we last did this.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, my Rough Rider book came out in 2019, and we chatted after that. And that was a collaboration with Triumph Books, as is the Maskless Goalies epic. I wish I could give you a nice, succinct answer to this. I've been failing on that account several times when I've been asked about this. But I was really fascinated when I was a little kid, centuries ago, with goalies. And I couldn't believe that any goalie would not wear a mask. But when I started following hockey, it was like 1971. And so there were still a few of them. And, there was Gus Worsley, of course, and there was Joe Daly. And I just could not believe that goalies wouldn't wear masks. Bobby Hull and Dennis Hull were running around shooting 100-mile-an-hour slap shots. And what really intrigued me, too, was that even though over the last decade plus, the amount of maskless goalies have been decreasing, suddenly for a little blip in time, it actually went up. Because Andy Brown got called up from Fort Worth Wings by the Detroit Red Wings. So suddenly they went from 2 to 3 maskless goalies in the National Hockey League. I just couldn't believe it. Anyway, fast forward to 2020, and pandemic hits, and I'm a sports writer, and there's no sports.
Yes.
How obsolete can a human being possibly be? And my editors at the Leader Post, bless their hearts, they said, has there ever been a bucket list project that you've wanted to do? Like, now's the time. Like, you're just trying to think of ideas as a sports writer with nothing going on. And you can't, there's only so many cancellation stories you can write at that time. And I'd always been fascinated with maskless goalies. So I suggested kind of a weekend takeout, 2,000 words on that topic for the Leader Post, and they were fine with it. And I got really early in the research project, research process. I talked to Glenn Hall already. I talked to Jerry Cheevers. It was just fascinating, and I thought, I think there's a book here. So I contacted my friends at Triumph Books and suggested it to them. We had a meeting, and they said, "Yeah, do it." And I'm so grateful to them. They've been awesome, and it was so neat to be able to scratch an itch that's kind of been there for about 50 years, and really get into the psychology and the evolution of goaltending and the just literally the changing face of the position.
Right, and it's called Wild Tales of Hockey Goaltenders in the Era Before Masks. Like I said, Brave Face. Now, on the cover, that at first glance, one says that's Terry Sawchuk. Is that true?
That absolutely is. And the cover was done. The artwork for the cover was done by Drew Hunter, who's an art teacher at Luther College High School in Regina. And Drew is just awesome. He very early in the process, he volunteered. He said, "If you need any art for the book, let me know." And so I mentioned him to the publisher as well, and they exchanged notes. And before you know it, Drew Hunter was the cover artist, and boy, did he do a nice depiction of that classic Terry Sawchuk photo.
And there's lots of other goalie books out there. I think I have 4 or 5 of them myself. So this one is different because
it's a really. I'm surprised actually that nobody really dug into it before, because so much was made of Jacques Plante being the first permanently masked goaltender on November 1st, 1959. And maybe it was just me being fascinated by it, but I always thought I was kind of surprised that it hadn't been done. I just think it's kind of a neat throwback idea. I mean, I think people find goalies interesting anyway. They're quirky characters. Well, what could be quirkier in sports than a goalie without a mask.
Exactly.
I mean, and I always love the expressions too. Like they just, Ed Jockman, you watch him in net with the Rangers way back when without a mask, and he had such a great, expression. Or Gump Worsley's face, or Roger Crozier with the Red Wings, and some of the facial contortions he could perform. And I just thought it was really neat to go back and remind people, like, this is what these guys used to do. They were all-time greats, and they didn't wear not only facial protection, but the protection for the rest of their body was pretty scant as well. Look at those old shoulder pads, right? I just thought it was a really cool idea to get into a bit of the psychology of goaltending and the evolution of goaltending and the history of goaltending, while using the masks as a bit of a premise, or lack thereof, as a premise for it. It just it just, once I got into it, it was like, I can't believe these guys did this. I never could anyway. But when you find out that Terry Sawchuk on his 18th birthday in 1947 got hit in the face, his eyeball was removed from its socket. They stitched up the eyeball and then put it back in, and then he played 15 more years without a mask. Like, it's amazing.
It's amazing. I mean, that's stitched up how do you stitch up an eyeball in 1947? Good grief!
I know. I should have found somebody who's into the history of surgery, and just like how did anybody do that? Not for the faint of heart, that story, but that's exactly what happened to an 18-year-old Terry Sawchuk. Happy birthday, Terry. That was on his 18th birthday.
The only thing I can think of is that coming back from the Second World War, I guess lots of, surgery on the fly techniques were developed, and maybe some of that filtered down to a medical student or a young doctor who took that on and said, "Oh, I can fix that, stitch, stitch, stitch." So that's
wow.
I
guess if you've been working on battlefields from 39 to 45, I guess that would be pretty routine. But it blew me away to read that, and I got a chance to talk to Terry Sawchuk's son, Jerry.
Right.
And that was so cool. What a cool guy to talk to. He was kind of what I imagined Terry Sawchuk being like a real, just straight to the guts of the matter, honest, guy. I just thought I'd heard so many depictions of what Terry Sawchuk was like, and Jerry Sawchuk kind of adhered to that template. I really loved talking to him. He was just a brutally honest, really accommodating guy. That was so so neat to think, like, I'm talking to Terry Sawchuk's son right now.
Right.
Like, that just blew me away. Johnny Bauer's grandson. Like, just having the chance to do that, I'm still kind of agog over the fact that I was able to do it. It was just such an honor. The people were just amazing.
Well,
thank you, Jerry Sawchuk.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that leads me to, like, how did you do this? Did you call one person who gave you a number to call another person? What are the behind-the-scenes routines, I guess, that go into producing a book such as Brave Face? Well,
I don't like getting old, because that means arthritis, and that means type 2 diabetes, and some of the other things that I've done over the years that that I've collected over the years. One of the benefits of being old is you know people, and so I was able to contact a few people that I just that I'd known through hockey over the years, and if that didn't have to be somebody I was interviewing, it was somebody who I knew that person. And I think, for example, Dave Stubbs, NHL.com, an amazing hockey historian, used to work at the Montreal Gazette, and I got to know Dave at the 2008 Olympics in Beijing. We were both covering the Olympics for what was then called the CanWest News Service and is now Post Media. So Dave pretty much knows everybody in hockey, and Dave was so helpful setting me up, especially early in the process. It was Dave who set up put me in touch with Jerry Cheevers and things like that. That's kind of how it. I think it was Dave as well that helped me get in touch with Jerry Sawchuk. And a friend of mine, Dick White, he's a longtime university administrator at the University of Regina. Well, John Bauer III was involved in communications for Canadian University Sports, and so Dick knew John Bauer, of course. So Dick put me in touch with Johnny Bauer's grandson. Things like that. Sometimes it was just a really good communications person at an NHL team. The Pittsburgh Penguins helped to set me up with Eddie Johnston, for example. Every one of them, there was kind of a different mechanism, and sometimes it was just a 411 search, and that's how I found Gay Cooley, Chapter 16 in Orillia, Ontario, and Gay Cooley was amazing.
There's a picture of him. He played for Michigan Spartans, I think it was.
Yeah, he helped them. He was just a tremendous university goalie in the 60s, and then went on to play pretty much a decade in the minors without a mask until the very end. And even then, he would, in the midst of a game, he'd say, "I don't want to wear this thing," and he'd just put it on the back of the net. Gay Cooley was one of the great characters and nicest, funniest people I've ever talked to. Gay Cooley, I think, is an entire book. If anybody wants to write a book, let me know and I'll give you Gay Cooley's number or just 411. And Gay Cooley, honestly, he was just amazing. I love talking to him. He was just, I think I spoke with him 3 times.
I think, I don't know if that's true or not, but I think that hockey players as a whole seem to be the media-friendly people. Have you found that?
They are. Yeah. I mean, I covered junior hockey for forever, and I always, I never had a bad experience covering, dealing with a junior hockey player. I've never been turned down for an interview in almost 40 years. I've never had a junior hockey player say no. Rare is the day that they don't return a phone call. And, you look at, somebody like Sidney Crosby, who all the attention that he gets, and he's still, pretty much the same guy he was when he was, just an upstart. You look at Connor Bedard and everything that he has to face. Connor Bedard's about as nice a kid as you'll ever talk to. Right?
Oh, that's right. He was in Regina.
That's generally the hockey. Yeah, so that's generally what hockey players are like. And goalies their goalies aren't as flaky as they used to be. They aren't as, I think you have to be a bit off center to play goalie when even, again, you're doing it without a mask. Your hockey's equivalent of a javelin catcher, but they love telling stories. Hockey people love telling stories, and the sport lends itself to it. You go to a hockey game and there's scouts there, and there's scouts rooms at hockey rinks, and they hold court before games and during intermissions. There's kind of that convivial mentality that's associated with hockey that I think lends itself to the nature of hockey people, and then by extension lends itself to the type of storytelling you hope to do when you're exploring a topic such as this one, or pretty much anything with regard to hockey. And once you get into nostalgia, it's just so much fun with this sport.
Speaking of hockey players and goalies being a bit off the beaten path, there's a story. Gump Worsley, when he was playing for the Rangers, they said, "Which team gives you the most trouble?" And he said, "My own."
Yeah, the Rangers.
Something like that.
Gump Worsley was just terrific, and that was my lone frustration with this book. When Gump Worsley was he was scouting for the Minnesota North Stars, and he was in Regina for the Western Hockey League All-Star Game in 1987. And I was freelancing for the Leader Post at the time. I was still in journalism school, and I interviewed Gump Worsley, and I never really did anything with it. It was on an old cassette tape. And I talked to Gump Worsley for about 20 minutes, and I didn't have any written record of this interview. So one day, I went into the basement and found all my cassette tapes from like 35, 40 years ago, and fast forward, stop. And I did this through like 200 cassette tapes, both sides, trying to find the Gump Worsley interview from 1987. No luck. But fortunately, a friend of mine named Glenn Duck has 3 copies of the Gump Worsley autobiography. They call me Gump. And which is really hard to get. Like, you go on internet, you try to buy a copy, if they call me Gump, they call me Gump, it's like several $100s. Like, it's a rare book and it's a lot of money. Oh. And but fortunately, my great friend Glenn Duck had a copy and he lent it to me, and that's why Glenn got a free copy of this book.
Oh, good.
And the Gump Worsley told his whole story really expansively and humorously in his book, a collaboration, I think, with Tim Moriarty. So I was able to trace the Gump Worsley history. But man, I told myself, just watch. The day after your book is published, you will find the cassette tape on your bed, on your nightstand or something, right?
Right.
So,
has it shown up yet?
Nothing yet. Like I know it's in there somewhere, right?
Yep.
Oh, and as I got down to the final 2 or 3 tapes, I was just, I was doing it, but I'd lost hope. I drained a Saturday and a Sunday completely, just going, stop. Nope, not him. Stop. Like that was my entire weekend looking for Gump Worsley in 1987. And there was all sorts of stuff from '87 that I found, like interviews that I'd done, and even one day I went into journalism class. I just pressed record during a lecture, so I had like a pros lecture from 1987. I had all that stuff, but I didn't have Gump Worsley.
But no Gump Worsley.
But I could hear me kind of my stomach rumbling. Listen to a role of a journalist with Dr. Nick Russell from 1987. So it was nice to hear Nick's voice again too. He was an awesome guy. But I was really looking for Gump Worsley.
Well, let's talk a bit about some of the characters or people you have in the book, and the one that immediately jumped out at me was not any of the famous names, but Ian Young. Tell me Ian Young's story.
I lucked into that one. He was. My dad and I went to the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto in 1974, and they had a book there called The Men and the Nets by Jim Hunt. And so I reread The Men and the Nets, just trying to find things about maskless goalies. And in one of the chapters, they referred to a Boston prospect named Ian Young, whose hockey career had been cut short because he had been hit in the eye while playing for the Oshawa Generals during a junior hocky game by a Mickey Redmond shot. And so I got really interested in this. And it's like, ooh, interesting. I'd never, he was supposed to be the next one after Jerry Cheevers and Eddie Johnston in Boston.
Yep.
And by the early 70s, Jerry Cheevers was in his late 20s and Eddie Johnston was in his early 30s. So Ian Young was supposed to be the next guy. And then he got hit playing barefaced at junior hockey in 1966. Got hit in the eye by Mickey Redmond. Pretty much lost all the vision in his eye, and he did play some university hockey after that. He actually went to the training camp with the Boston Bruins in the early 70s, but wasn't able to fulfill the considerable promise that people said he had. And I was able to find Ian Young, who went on to be a great success in life. Was very successful in business. He wrote numerous books on goaltending. He was a goalie coach. Just great, really cool guy. And it was so neat to be able to tell that story. And he was such a smart guy and so cooperative. And the bonus of this was I was able to talk to Ricky Redmond, and that was just to hear that side of him and to hear, decades later, how concerned he was. How's Ian doing, right?
Yep.
I ended up giving Mickey Redmond Ian Young's contact information. I hope they had a chance to chat. And he, it still bugs him, all these years later, that there was no ill intent there. That was just the way the game is played. But Mickey Redmond had one of the great hard shots ever, and even if it wasn't full speed, it could do some damage. And I left a message. I was trying to get a hold of Mickey Redmond, and I wasn't really getting anywhere. So I emailed. I had the NHL media directory, and he works for Bally Sports Detroit. He's a commentator on Red Wings telecasts. And I sent an email to the producer of the Red Wings telecasts, and he left a message for Mickey, who called me one day, right out of the blue.
Yep.
And he was awesome. Now I got NHL Center Ice, and I watch more Red Wings games than I ever have before because I'm so indebted to Mickey Redmond, and he's so good on the air. So it was neat to be able to tell that story, not only from the perspective of Ian Young, but from the perspective of Mickey Redmond, and the way he was able to tell the story really enhanced the chapter. And it was interesting because Mickey told me that, Ian's career got cut short, but Mickey was like a 2-time 50-goal scorer. He played for Canada in the 72 Summit Series, but even well before he was 30, I think it was a back injury that cut his career short. And he said he was going through the same things that Ian was doing because his career was cut short long before people, thought he would be done too. And he said he dealt with some of the same issues that probably a decade earlier Ian Young had been facing. Both of them were so good. There was no, ill will between either of them. It was really ended up being a nice story, even though the premise of it is somebody losing an eye,
right.
Or the foundation of it was that, right?
Well, if I remember reading the chapter, it was Ian Young is a tall goalie, came out a bit to block the angle, and Mickey Redmond was going to shoot low, but then the puck hit something or bounced or fluttered and smacked Ian Young right in the eye, and he wasn't even shooting high. He was trying to shoot low, apparently.
Yeah, Mickey said he's still not sure how it happened. Like maybe it hit an ice chip and just took an unexpected carom. Yeah. He says, and I believe him, because I mean, this was a guy who twice scored 50 goals in the National Hockey League, was a very prolific scorer with Peterborough. Mm-hmm. He knew where the puck was going. And there was no, now, the way goalies play goal, now they're in the butterfly, and their head is going to be in the line of fire. Their head's almost part of the mechanism of stopping the puck. Back then, that was the era of stand-up goaltenders.
Yep.
And so if you're hitting a goalie in the head, that means your shot is not going to go in. It's high. So the intent for Mickey Redmond, and certainly the routine, the way he scored goals, would have been to have the puck go lower, because that's how you can score. And there's nothing to be gained from shooting that high. All you're going to do is have the puck go, clanging off the plexiglass. Exactly. So there's no way that was intentional. The Andy Bathgate shot that hit Jacques Plante on November 1st, 1959, that was definitely intentional.
Right. Well, they were having a bit of a feud, I guess, weren't they?
Yeah, Andy wasn't too happy with Jacques, and without having to say anything, he certainly made that clear. And the weird thing is, 1978, Jacques Plante gets inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. Who else goes in the same year? Andy Bathgate.
Andy Bathgate, right.
I never knew that until I started researching the book. I don't know if that was intentional, but there was certainly some irony in it.
Yep. That's great. A couple more questions, because we don't want to talk about the whole book, although we could. The one chapter, Have Plate Will Travel, what's that about?
Bob Perro. Oh, I didn't know anything about him. He played from the early 50s into the early years of the World Hockey Association. Played everywhere. Had a few stints in the National Hockey League. Actually did pretty well, but it was always kind of on a fill-in basis. And he was referred to in so many Boston newspaper stories as roly-poly, and he always had fun, poking fun at his own appearance. And until he's in the American Hockey League Hall of Fame. He played for a long time with the Rochester Americans, and he was in his early 40s and still going at it in the World Hockey Association for the old Los Angeles Sharks.
Oh.
Remember them?
Maybe.
And I had the good thing. There's a wonderful tool called newspapers.com.
Yes, I have a subscription too. I do.
Isn't it amazing?
It's great.
How did we live without newspapers.com?
Oh,
It's like I couldn't have done this book without newspapers.com, just to find these newspaper dispatches from Des Moines, Iowa, Rochester, and I mean everywhere.
Yep.
That was just such an invaluable source, and that's how I had to pretty much trace the Bob Perro story, because in 1980s, sadly, in Quebec, he was killed in a car accident.
Oh.
And so it was it was really tough to kind of tell the story post hockey, and there weren't many years, sadly, post hockey for Bob Perro, but those years in which he played, and that was all more than 20 years, it was well documented. And he was just a great, funny character. He would have been somebody who would have been so much fun to interview, because he just, the newspaper writers of the day made fun of him a bit while acknowledging his high degree of capability and goal. But more than anything, he had fun with himself. And I talked to Norm Fong, who is a longtime Rough Riders equipment manager. Before that, he was a trainer for the Regina Pats. And Norm was actually a trainer with the Los Angeles Sharks in their early days. So he knew Bob Perro, and said his general protection was even without considering masks, his shoulder pads were just virtually not there.
Yeah.
And he was just a funny guy. Everybody loved him, and I'm glad I got a chance to tell that story, because I hadn't really seen it told anywhere. And those kind of unsung guys were really, to me, the heart of the book, because that's where I thought maybe some new ground was broken, just by having a chance to talk about Russ Gillow and Bob Perro, and Chapter 16, Gay Cooley. Wayne Rutledge, who turned out to be the last intentionally maskless goalie that I could find in hockey history in 1978. Ian Young, who you mentioned, and there we got into a bit of Andy Brown and as well Joe Daly, and those stories were really cool to tell.
And wrapping up stories about the book, I have a couple questions after this. But Brave Face, you mentioned Dave Dryden in particular. What prompted all of that? Because everybody knows Ken Dryden, and Dave Dryden, yeah, he played for a few teams. His name doesn't obviously come to the uppermost part of the mind when one talks about goalies. So what did he have to offer?
Well, I found out that in the late 50s, Dave Dryden, playing for the Toronto Marlboros, he'd been hit in the face and it was like a really serious injury. And so I thought, he's sort of from that era. And what I didn't realize is that Dave was designing his own goalie masks in the 60s. He was kind of a pioneer that way. And the NHL didn't have second string goalies for the longest time. And then suddenly, as the mid 60s approached, there were backups. So
Yep.
Glenn Hall's first backup, or one of his first backups, was Dave Dryden. So so the two, there's somebody who could tell me a bit about the evolution of that position. What I didn't realize that Dave Dryden was such a crucial part of hockey history, goalie history, because it was he who in the 1970s, along with a mask manufacturer named Greg Harrison, pioneered the mask that is worn today, like the cage combination, which is a hybrid of the fiberglass masks and the kind of the cage masks,
like Dominic Hasek used to wear.
Dave it was his brainchild to kind of combine the two, and he worked closely with Greg Harrison, and we're talking in mid to late 70s, so we are pushing 50 years, and that mask has had so much longevity. If you look at it, the original fiberglass mask that some goalies tinker with but never wore in a game until Jacques Plante did in 1979.
Yep.
Within 20 years, those are being ushered out by the Dave Dryden mask that we're still seeing. So that mask has had like 250% more longevity than the primitive fiberglass masks that people remember. Dave Dryden, I think, is a huge underrated contributor to hockey history. And Dave was actually going to write a portion of the book for me. I was going to have him I was going to honor him in the preface, and he'd agreed to do it. And then, very unexpectedly, Dave passed away in 2022, in the fall of 2022. He had proofread the entire book for me.
Oh.
I'd emailed it to him. He'd made some suggestions. He was very supportive. He sent me a bunch of pictures of him in his old mask. He was just amazing. Like, what an amazing guy. So I dedicated the book in part to Dave Dryden, because I just felt that degree of indebtedness to him, and I think every goalie who plays today should be indebted to Dave Dryden, because they're wearing something that originally was his concoction, along with that of Greg Harrison, who also deserves a lot of credit.
That's great. Brave Face is the book. It's Wild Tales of Hockey Goaltenders in the Era Before Masks by Rob Vanstone. One quick question, Rob, before you let you go back to play with Candy in the backyard and chasing a non-existent tennis ball. That's his dog, by the way. Looking back on your career, what's the best writing advice you ever received?
I go back to journalism school and a professor named Jim McKenzie, and I've passed this on to a bunch of people, and it's called the Hey Fred approach, and it's the best cure I've found for writer's block, where if you're stumped, and we all face that, and it's not just if you write for a living, if you're writing an exam in high school or university or whatever, and you're just stumped, and the clock is ticking or a deadline is coming, and it's the Hey Fred approach. Suppose something happens that's really noteworthy, and you get home and you see your neighbor Fred across the fence, and you want to tell Fred, hey, here's what happened. How would you phrase it when you're talking to Fred? You would just phrase it really simply, and you would tell him, here's what happened. And if you're stuck, just write it like you were telling it to your neighbor across the fence, and then it will be the ignition for paragraph after paragraph. It gets you into the story. Now, I found more times than not the Hey Fred introduction will be revised and refined or completely dispensed with, but it will get you started, and then you can write the story logically, and if there's time that remains, you can go back, and if you're not happy with the Hey Fred, you can change it, but it will always resolve writer's block. You might not win a Pulitzer for the solution, but it will prevent staring at an empty screen, and that's never what you want. So I'm still indebted to Jim McKenzie at the U of R Journalism School for instilling in me and some others the importance of the Hey Fred approach, and I still use it. It's been almost 40 years since Jim told me about it, but it's foolproof. So, and it can be Hey Fred, or it can be Hey Candy, or it can be Hey Dennis. But, it'll work. So
it'll work.
Thanks,
wow.
Jim.
Thanks, Jim. And hey, Rob, thank you very much. And do you have anything else planned, or are you taking it easy for a while?
Well, I'm working with the Saskatchewan Rough Riders now, and so I'm loving every minute of that. So that's I've got some history projects that I'm trying to get done during the off season, so that when the football season gets here, I can just worry exclusively or primarily about football season. So that's keeping me busy, and being a husband to Christula, and we both love our entitled rescue dog Candy, and she demands a lot of attention. So it's a pretty basic life. I have no desire to ever travel again. I just want to sit around, enjoy my job, enjoy my wife, enjoy my dog, and enjoy having nice conversations like this too.
Thank you very much, Rob Vanstone.
Thank you so much, Dennis. I really appreciate your time and interest.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.